The mining station Kepler 442 floated in the black void between stars, its metal hull scarred from years of asteroid impacts. Inside the cramped workers' quarters, 23 beings from different worlds tried to make the best of their terrible situation. The Zephyrian Corporation had bought them all as indentured servants, promising freedom after 10 years of labor. Most knew they would never live to see that day. Crix huddled in the corner, his small blue-scaled body trembling as the larger aliens laughed and pointed at him. At only 14 years old, he was the youngest worker on the station. His people, the Thylorians, were known throughout the galaxy for their intelligence and gentle nature. Unfortunately, they were also known for being physically weak. "Look at the little fish boy," sneered Vrak, a massive Corellian with arms like tree trunks. "Still crying for his mommy?" The other workers chuckled as Vrak grabbed Crix by his thin arm and dragged him to the center of the room. Crix's large golden eyes filled with tears, but he had learned not to make noise when they hurt him. The overseers would only punish him more if they heard crying. His scales, once a brilliant blue like a summer sky, had turned pale gray from stress and malnutrition. "I have an idea," said Nexus, a snake-like reptarian whose forked tongue flicked out as he spoke. "The little thing is always crawling around on the floor anyway. Why don't we make it official?" The other aliens burst into cruel laughter. Before Crix could understand what was happening, Vrak had forced him onto his hands and knees. The Corellian's massive boot pressed down on Crix's back, pinning him to the cold metal floor. "There we go. Much better use for the little freak." "My feet are tired from working in the mines all day," announced Gorth, a six-armed insectoid creature. He walked over and placed 2 of his clawed feet on Crix's shoulders, using the boy as a living footrest. "This is perfect." One by one, the other aliens began using Crix as furniture. They would sit on him, rest their feet on his back, and even use him as a table for their food trays. The young Thylorian's body ached constantly, but he endured it in silence. Speaking up would only make things worse. The human workers on the station kept to themselves, staying in their own section of the quarters. Earth had only recently joined the galactic community, and most aliens considered humans to be primitive and weak. The human miners worked the most dangerous sections of the asteroid belt, and their survival rate was the lowest of any species on the station. Captain Marcus Chen was different from the other humans. While they seemed broken by their circumstances, he still carried himself with dignity. His dark eyes burned with an intensity that made even the alien overseers uncomfortable. He had been a soldier before the Zephyrians captured his transport ship and sold him into slavery. Unlike the others, he had not forgotten who he was. Marcus watched from across the room as the aliens continued to abuse the Thylorian child. His jaw clenched as he saw Crix flinch under the weight of Gorth's claws. The boy's breathing was becoming labored, and Marcus could see that his small frame was reaching its breaking point. "Hey, fish boy," called out Nexus, his serpentine body coiled on a nearby bench. "Crawl over here and let me use your back as a desk. I need to write a letter to my mate back home." The other aliens laughed as Crix slowly crawled across the floor, his scales scraping against the rough metal. Marcus had seen enough. He stood up from his bunk, his tall frame casting a shadow across the room. At 6 feet and 4 inches, he was larger than most humans, but still smaller than creatures like Vrak. What made him dangerous was not his size, but the cold determination in his eyes. "That's enough," Marcus said quietly, his voice cutting through the laughter like a blade. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the human who had dared to speak. Vrak was the first to react, his massive form rising from where he had been sitting on Crix's legs. "Did the monkey just give us an order?" Vrak's voice was filled with amusement. "I think the thin air up here is affecting its tiny brain." Brock. Brock. Marcus walked slowly across the room, his boots clicking against the metal floor. He stopped directly in front of Vrak, looking up at the alien's scarred face without showing any fear. "I said that's enough. Let the kid go." Gorth's mandibles clicked together in what passed for laughter among his species. "The human thinks it can protect the little fish. How touching." His 6 arms flexed, showing off muscles that could crush a human skull. "You should worry about your own kind, monkey," hissed Nexus, Humans don't last long on this station. Something always seems to happen to them in the mines. Marcus's expression didn't change, but his hands slowly curled into fists. Maybe something should happen to you instead. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. No human had ever challenged the alien workers directly. They were outnumbered and outgunned on every level. But something in Marcus's voice made even Vrak pause for a moment. "You know what I think?" said Nexus, slithering closer to Marcus. "I think this human needs to learn its place. Just like the little fish did." His forked tongue flicked out, tasting Marcus's scent. "Maybe we need 2 footrests." The other aliens began to circle around Marcus, their various claws and teeth gleaming in the harsh artificial light. Crix watched from the floor, too weak to move but terrified for the human who had tried to help him. No one had ever stood up for him before. Marcus looked around at the alien faces surrounding him. He was outnumbered 20 to 1. And any of these creatures could kill him with their bare hands. But he had survived worse odds during his time as a soldier. More importantly, he had something they didn't understand. He had the fury of a species that had clawed its way up from the bottom of the food chain. "You want to see what happens when a human gets angry?" Marcus asked softly. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that made the aliens hesitate. "You want to find out why my species conquered our entire planet while yours were still learning to use tools?" Vrak laughed, but it sounded forced. "Big words from a slave. Let's see how tough you really are." "Monkey." The Carillion reached out to grab Marcus with one of his massive hands, but the human was no longer there. Marcus had moved faster than any of them expected, dropping low and driving his fist into Vrak's knee with surgical precision. The alien's leg buckled, and he crashed to the floor with a roar of pain and surprise. Before the others could react, Marcus had rolled away and come up in a fighting stance. His eyes swept the room, calculating distances and threats like the trained warrior he was. "Anyone else want to find out what a primitive human can do?" The aliens stared in shock at their fallen leader. Vrak was trying to stand, but his leg wasn't supporting his weight properly. How had the small human moved so fast? How had he known exactly where to hit? "Lucky shot," growled Gorth, his mandibles clicking angrily. "Let's see how well you do against all of us." But before the insectoid could move, alarm klaxons began blaring throughout the station. The harsh red lights of an emergency alert bathed the quarters in an ominous glow. A voice crackled over the intercom system. "All workers report to emergency stations immediately. We have detected an unknown vessel approaching the mining platform. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." The aliens looked at each other with confusion and growing fear. Unknown vessels in this part of space usually meant one thing: pirates. The Zephyrian Corporation had many enemies, and their mining stations were tempting targets for raiders looking for valuable ore and slaves to sell. Marcus used the distraction to move closer to Crix. The young Thylorian was still on the floor, his body shaking from exhaustion and pain. Marcus knelt beside him and gently helped him to his feet. Crix's large golden eyes stared up at him with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Can you stand?" Marcus asked quietly. Crix nodded weakly, though his legs were unsteady. "Why did you help me?" he whispered in accented standard. "Now they will hurt you too." Marcus's expression softened slightly as he looked down at the child. "Because it was the right thing to do. And because no one should have to face monsters alone." The intercom crackled again with more urgency. "All workers to emergency stations now. Security teams to defensive positions. This is your final warning." The aliens began filing out of the quarters, their earlier aggression forgotten in the face of a real threat. But Vrak remained on the floor, his eyes burning with hatred as he stared at Marcus. "This isn't over, human. When this emergency is finished, I'm going to make you watch while I tear that little fish apart piece by piece." Marcus met his gaze without flinching. "I'll be waiting." As the quarters emptied, Marcus helped Crix to one of the bunks. The boy's breathing was becoming more regular. But Marcus could see the psychological damage that months of abuse had done to him. Crix flinched whenever anyone moved too quickly, and his scales remained that sickly pale color that spoke of chronic stress. "What happens now?" Crix asked in a small voice. Marcus looked toward the door where the aliens had disappeared. He could hear the sounds of panic and preparation echoing through the station's corridors. Whatever was coming, it would change everything on Kepler 442. He just hoped they would all survive long enough to see what that change would bring. Now we find out what we're really made of, Marcus said quietly. But even as he spoke those words, he was already planning. The emergency had given him an opportunity, and he intended to use it. The aliens thought they knew what humans were capable of, but they were about to learn that they had severely underestimated their newest slaves. The station shuddered as something large docked with their hull. Through the small viewport, Marcus could see the sleek black shape of a ship unlike anything in the Zephyrian fleet. Pirates, raiders, or something worse had found them. But for the first time since his capture, Marcus smiled. Chaos meant opportunity. And he had been waiting for his chance. The real war was about to begin. The unknown vessel had been a false alarm. A damaged Zephyrian transport ship limping home from a failed mining expedition in the Outer Rim. But the emergency had given Marcus something precious. Time to think and plan while the aliens were distracted. Now, as the station returned to its normal routine, he knew exactly what he was going to do. Crix stayed close to Marcus as they made their way to the mining sections. The young Thylorian had become his shadow over the past few days, too afraid to be alone with the other aliens. Marcus didn't mind. The boy reminded him of his younger brother back on Earth, before the Zephyrians had destroyed his world. "Stay behind me and keep quiet," Marcus whispered as they approached the tool storage area. "If anyone asks, we're checking the equipment for tomorrow's shift." The storage room was empty, just as Marcus had hoped. He quickly moved to a locked cabinet marked with Zephyrian warning symbols. The aliens assumed that humans couldn't read their language, but Marcus had been studying it secretly for months. The cabinet contained emergency mining charges, small but powerful explosives used to break apart stubborn asteroid formations. "What are you doing?" Crix asked nervously, as Marcus began working on the lock with a piece of bent metal. "Evening the odds," Marcus replied. His fingers worked carefully on the primitive locking mechanism. The Zephyrians were so confident in their superiority that they used simple locks, never imagining that their slaves might be clever enough to bypass them. The lock clicked open, and Marcus quickly grabbed several of the palm-sized charges. They were designed to be stable until activated by a specific frequency, making them perfect for his plan. He slipped them into his work coveralls and closed the cabinet. "Marcus," Crix whispered urgently. "Someone is coming." Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Marcus grabbed a mining tool from the wall and motioned for Crix to do the same. Just as Overseer Thane entered the storage room, the massive Zephyrian looked like a cross between a rhinoceros and a bear, with gray hide that could stop most small weapons. "What are you doing here, slaves?" Thane's voice rumbled like distant thunder. His 4 eyes swept the room suspiciously. "Preparing for tomorrow's shift?" "Overseer," Marcus said with just the right amount of subservience. "We wanted to check our equipment after the emergency alert," Thane grunted, apparently satisfied. "Good. The corporation expects increased production after today's disruption. Any worker who fails to meet quotas will be punished." His gaze fixed on Crix, who trembled under the alien's stare, especially the weak ones. After Thane left, Marcus and Crix made their way back to the living quarters. The other human workers were already there, looking exhausted from their shifts in the most dangerous mining sections. Marcus had tried to organize them before, but years of slavery had broken their spirits. They just wanted to survive one more day. The alien workers arrived soon after, filling the quarters with their various stenches and harsh laughter. Vrock limped in last, his legs still bothering him from Marcus's attack. His eyes immediately found the human across the room, burning with promises of revenge. "Well, well," Nexus hissed, as he slithered over to where Marcus and Crix were sitting. "Look who's back." The brave human and his little pet fish. Gorth clicked his mandibles in amusement. "I was hoping the emergency would take care of our problem, but I suppose we'll have to handle it ourselves." Marcus stood slowly, his hand moving casually to his tool belt where the mining charges were hidden. "I thought we settled this earlier." "Oh, we did," Vrock said as he hobbled closer. You got lucky once, monkey, but luck runs out. The other aliens began to circle around them again. But this time they were more cautious. You know what I think? Said a new voice from across the room. I think all of you are cowards. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Sarah Martinez, one of the human miners. She was small and wiry, with grease-stained clothes and calloused hands. But her eyes blazed with the same fire that Marcus recognized in himself. Did the monkey female just call us cowards? Vrak laughed, though there was uncertainty in his voice. First, Marcus had fought back. And now another human was showing defiance. It was unsettling. I called it like I see it, Sarah said as she walked over to stand beside Marcus. 20 of you, against one human, and a kid. Yeah. That sounds like cowardice to me. One by one, the other human workers began to stand. There were only 8 of them total, but something had changed in their faces. Marcus's act of defiance had awakened something they thought was dead. Hope. This is touching, Nexus hissed. All the little monkeys standing together. It won't help when we crush you all. But Marcus could see the doubt in the aliens' eyes. They had controlled the humans through fear and isolation, turning them against each other with threats and punishment. A united human resistance was something they hadn't planned for. Before you try anything, Marcus said calmly, you might want to know something. Humans have a saying, don't poke the bear. Do you know what it means? The aliens looked at each other with confusion. Vrak was the first to speak. Are you threatening us, slave? Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'm educating you. You see, bears are normally peaceful creatures. They just want to be left alone. But if you threaten their cubs, if you hurt them, or try to make them submit, Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. They become the most dangerous predator in the forest. Enough talk, roared Gorth, his 6 arms spreading wide. Let's finish this. The insectoid charged forward, his claws extended to tear Marcus apart. But the human was ready. Marcus pulled one of the mining charges from his belt and held it up where everyone could see it. His thumb hovered over the activation switch. One more step and I blow this place apart, Marcus said quietly. These charges are designed to crack asteroids. In a closed space like this, they'll turn all of us into paste. The room went completely silent. Even Gorth stopped his charge, his compound eyes fixed on the small device in Marcus's hand. The mining charges were indeed powerful enough to kill everyone in the quarters if detonated in an enclosed space. You're bluffing, Nexus said, but his voice lacked conviction. You would die too. Would I? Marcus asked. You've been treating us like animals for months. You made a child into your personal footrest. You think I care what happens to any of us at this point? His thumb moved closer to the switch. I spent 5 years fighting in the Terran colonial wars. I've seen what happens when good people do nothing, while bullies run free. It doesn't end well for anyone. Vrak's massive fists clenched and unclenched as he tried to process this new development. The human was supposed to be broken, defeated. Instead, he was willing to commit suicide just to take them all down with him. It was insane, but the cold look in Marcus's eyes suggested he was completely serious. What do you want? Vrak asked finally. Marcus let the question hang in the air for a moment. Then he smiled, and it was even more terrifying than his threats had been. I want justice. He gestured toward Crix, who was still cowering behind the group of humans. This boy is going to walk across the room. He's going to sit on that bench over there, and then each of you is going to crawl over to him on your hands and knees and lick his feet clean. The aliens stared at him in disbelief. Gorth's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. That is impossible. We cannot show such submission to an inferior being. Then you can explain to the Zephyrian Corporation why their entire mining operation got blown up, Marcus replied. His thumb brushed against the activation switch, causing several aliens to take involuntary steps backward. You're insane, whispered Nexus. No, Marcus said. I'm angry. And you have no idea what an angry human is capable of. He looked around the room at each alien face. You wanted to see us submit? You wanted to break our spirits and make us into animals? Well, congratulations. You succeeded. You turned us into the most dangerous animals in the galaxy. Sarah stepped forward, her own hand moving to her tool belt. We've all got access to these charges. Every human on this station. You think Marcus is the only one who's had enough? The other human workers nodded grimly. They had all reached their breaking point at different times, but Marcus's rebellion had given them permission to act. The aliens looked around nervously as they realized they were surrounded by potential suicide bombers. This is impossible, Vrak muttered. Slaves cannot behave this way. The corporation will not allow it. The corporation isn't here right now, Marcus pointed out. Just us, and I'm running out of patience. He turned to Crix, who was watching the standoff with wide, frightened eyes. Go sit on that bench, kid. It's time for these bullies to learn what it feels like to be on the bottom. Crix looked uncertain, but he slowly made his way across the room to the bench Marcus had indicated. His small blue form seemed tiny and vulnerable as he sat down, but for the first time since Marcus had known him, there was hope in his golden eyes. Well, Marcus asked the aliens, what's it going to be? Your pride or your lives? The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Finally, Vrak let out a sound that might have been a sob or a growl of rage. This is not over, human. The corporation will hear of this defiance. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But right now, you have a choice to make. Crawl or die. One by one, the aliens began to lower themselves to the floor. Vrak went first, his massive frame looking ridiculous as he crawled across the metal decking on his hands and knees. Nexus followed, his serpentine body sliding along the ground in obvious humiliation. Gorth came next, his 6 limbs moving awkwardly as he tried to maintain some dignity while crawling. They formed a line in front of Crix's bench, their heads bowed in submission. The young Thylorian looked overwhelmed by the sight of his former tormentors prostrating themselves before him. Go ahead, kid, Marcus said gently. Make them clean your feet. You've earned it. Crix extended one small blue foot, and Vrak reluctantly began to lick it clean. The massive Corellian's face was twisted with shame and rage, but he continued the humiliating task. One by one, the other aliens followed suit, their tongues working to clean every scale on Crix's feet. The human workers watched in satisfaction as justice was finally served. Years of abuse and humiliation were being repaid in the most fitting way possible. The aliens who had treated them like animals were now behaving like the beasts they truly were. But Marcus knew this was just the beginning. The Zephyrian Corporation would not tolerate this kind of rebellion for long. They had bought and paid for these slaves, and they would send reinforcements to restore order. The real test would come when the overseers arrived with their energy weapons and shock collars. For now, though, he was content to watch as Crix finally got the respect he deserved. The boy's scales were already beginning to regain some of their natural blue color as his stress levels dropped. Sometimes the smallest victories were the most important ones. Enjoying yourselves? Marcus asked the crawling aliens. This is what it feels like to be treated like furniture. Remember this feeling. Because if you ever touch that boy again, I'll make this look like a pleasant afternoon. Nexus raised his head from Crix's foot, his forked tongue flickering with disgust. The corporation will flay you alive for this insurrection. Marcus shrugged. Maybe, but you'll be too dead to see it happen. He held up the mining charge again. I've still got more of these, and I'm not afraid to use them. The next time any of you steps out of line, I'll turn this entire station into scrap metal. The aliens finished their humiliating task and crawled back to their side of the room. They huddled together, whispering in their various languages about what had just happened. Marcus could see the mixture of rage and fear in their eyes. They wanted revenge, but they were terrified of what the humans might do next. Crix stood up from the bench, his dignity restored for the first time in months. He walked over to Marcus with tears in his golden eyes, but they were tears of gratitude rather than pain. Thank you, he whispered. I thought I would never feel like a person again. Marcus put a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. You were always a person, kid. They just tried to make you forget it. He looked around the room at the sullen aliens and the determined humans, but now everyone knows where we stand. The question is, What do we do next? The emergency alarms woke everyone in the quarters, 6 hours later. This time, it wasn't a false alarm. Marcus could hear the distinctive whine of Zephyrian combat shuttles docking with the station's hull. The corporation had received word of the rebellion and was sending their security forces to restore order. "Everyone up!" Marcus shouted to the other humans. "They're here!" The alien workers were already stirring, and Marcus could see the mix of relief and anticipation on their faces. They thought their torment was over, that the corporation troops would punish the humans and return things to the way they were. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. Sarah Martinez was already checking her mining charges, making sure they were properly armed. The other human workers did the same, their faces grim but determined. They had tasted freedom for a few precious hours, and none of them were willing to go back to slavery. "Crix, stay close to me," Marcus ordered. The young Thylorian nodded, his newly bright blue scales shimmering in the harsh artificial light. He had spent the past few hours sitting upright for the first time in months, remembering what it felt like to be treated with dignity. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridors outside, accompanied by the mechanical whir of combat armor. Through the quarter's single viewport, Marcus could see Zephyrian troops moving through the station like a plague of metal locusts. They wore full environmental suits with integrated weapons systems, turning each soldier into a walking tank. "All workers remain in quarters," boomed a amplified voice over the intercom. "Compliance teams are conducting a security sweep. Any resistance will be met with extreme prejudice." Vrak struggled to his feet, still favoring the leg Marcus had damaged. His eyes burned with anticipation as he looked at the human across the room. "Now you die, monkey." The corporation doesn't tolerate rebellion from its property, but Marcus was staring at the viewport with a strange expression on his face. The Zephyrian troops were moving in standard formation, just as he had expected. What they hadn't expected was for their slaves to have military training and access to explosives. "Sarah," Marcus called out quietly, "take half the charges and get to the main power coupling on this level. When I give the signal, I blow it." "What signal?" Sarah asked as she gathered the small devices. Marcus smiled coldly. "You'll know it when you see it." The quarters door hissed open, and 3 Zephyrian guards entered. Their armor was polished black metal with glowing red sensors where their eyes should be. Each carried an energy rifle capable of cutting through solid steel. Behind them came Overseer Thane, his massive bulk barely fitting through the doorway. "Which one of you maggots started this rebellion?" Thane demanded, his 4 eyes scanning the assembled workers. The alien workers immediately began pointing at Marcus and chattering in their various languages. Nexus slithered forward, his serpentine body coiled with excitement. "It was the human called Marcus," he hissed. "He forced us to submit to the Thylorian whelp. He threatened to kill us all with mining charges." Thane's attention focused on Marcus like a targeting laser. "Is this true, slave? Did you threaten corporate property with destruction?" Marcus stood slowly, his hand resting casually on his tool belt. "I protected a child from abuse. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty." One of the guards stepped forward, raising his energy rifle. "Surrender any weapons or explosive devices. You will be processed for immediate termination." "I don't think so," Marcus replied. He pulled out one of the mining charges and held it where everyone could see. "You see, I've been thinking about your security protocols. They're designed to handle riots and work stoppages, not military insurgencies." Thane's hide bristled with alarm. "You dare threaten the corporation?" "I'm not threatening anyone," Marcus said calmly. "I'm making a tactical assessment. You have 3 guards in here, maybe a dozen more on the station. I have 8 humans with enough explosives to turn this entire facility into space debris." He paused. "The math doesn't favor you." The guard's weapons swiveled toward the other humans, but Marcus held up his hand. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. These charges are set to dead man switches. If any of us die, they all go off simultaneously." This was a lie, but the guards had no way to know that. The Zephyrian military was trained to deal with organized resistance, not desperate slaves willing to commit mutual suicide rather than submit. "This is impossible," Thane growled. Slaves do not behave this way. You are property of the corporation. Maybe we were, said Tom Bradley, another human miner. His weathered face was set in hard lines. But property doesn't fight back. People do. Crix stepped forward, his small blue form seeming to glow with inner strength. I am not property either. I am Crix of the Thylorian Republic, son of Ambassador Velith. My father will pay any ransom for my safe return. This statement hit the room like a thunderbolt. Even the aliens stopped their muttering as they realized what Crix had just revealed. He wasn't just another slave. He was the son of a diplomat. The Thylorian Republic had been looking for him for months, and his disappearance had caused a major diplomatic crisis. That's impossible, Nexus whispered. Diplomatic children have tracking implants. The Republic would have found him by now. Crix rolled up his sleeve, revealing a patch of scar tissue on his thin arm. The overseers removed it when I first arrived. They said I was just another worker who had been purchased legally. His golden eyes burned with new confidence. But I remember who I am. And my people never forget their own. Thane's face went pale beneath his gray hide. Enslaving diplomatic children was a violation of galactic law that could result in economic sanctions or even military intervention. If the Thylorian Republic discovered that the Zephyrian Corporation had been using the ambassador's son as forced labor, this changes nothing, one of the guards said, though his voice lacked conviction. Orders are to eliminate the rebellion and restore order. Go ahead, Marcus challenged. Fire your weapon. Kill a human. But remember that when the charges detonate, you'll be killing the son of a Thylorian ambassador too. I'm sure your corporate masters will understand when the Republic declares war over his death. The guards looked at each other uncertainly. Their orders had been simple. Crush the rebellion and execute the ringleaders. But the situation had become far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. Sarah's voice crackled over Marcus's hidden communicator. Charges are in place. Just say the word. Marcus took a step closer to the guards, the mining charge still visible in his hand. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to escort Crix to the nearest communication array. He's going to contact his father and explain his situation. Then you're going to arrange for transportation off this station for every human worker. Impossible, Thane roared. These slaves are corporate property. They cannot simply leave. Watch us, Marcus said quietly, then louder. Sarah, light it up. The lights went out as Sarah's charges destroyed the main power coupling. Emergency lighting flickered on, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. In the confusion, Marcus tackled the nearest guard and wrestled his energy rifle away. The weapon's weight was familiar in his hands. He had used similar models during the colonial wars. Chaos erupted in the quarters. The other humans scattered, using the darkness and their knowledge of the station layout to their advantage. The aliens cowered against the walls, unwilling to get caught between the humans and the corporation troops. Kill them all, Thane bellowed, but the guards were struggling to see in the dim emergency lighting. Their armor's sensors were designed for normal illumination, not the strobing red of backup power. Marcus fired the energy rifle, its beam cutting through the doorframe just inches from Thane's head. The next shot won't miss. Call off your troops and negotiate, or I'll turn this place into a tomb. More explosions echoed through the station as the other humans detonated charges in strategic locations. The artificial gravity fluctuated, causing everyone to stumble. Life support systems began failing, and the air started to taste stale and metallic. This is madness, one of the guards shouted. You're destroying the entire facility. That's the idea, Marcus replied. He kept the rifle trained on Thane while speaking to Crix. Kid, can you really contact your father from here? Crix nodded eagerly. If I can reach the communication array. Yes. But the overseers have blocked all diplomatic channels. Not anymore, they haven't, Tom Bradley called out from across the room. He was holding a second energy rifle taken from another guard. Sarah's charges took out most of their security systems. Communications should be wide open. Thane's massive form was shaking with rage and fear. The corporation will never allow this rebellion to succeed. Even if you escape this station, They will hunt you to the ends of the galaxy. Let them try, Marcus said. You made one critical mistake when you enslaved us. You assumed that humans were just another species to be broken and controlled. But you never bothered to study our history. He gestured around the damaged quarters, where human workers were holding captured Zephyrian weapons, while alien slaves cowered in fear. We're the species that turned our entire planet into a battlefield, rather than submit to conquest. We fought wars for centuries just to decide who got to be in charge. Did you really think we'd just roll over and accept slavery? The intercom crackled to life with Sarah's voice. Marcus, I've got control of the station's communication array. Crix can make